Hello Year 7 and 8 and welcome to yet another drama video. You've produced some excellent work, and this week we're looking at my favourite topic in the list of characters we've looked at so far. But before we start, I want to remind you of something that you can do that might make watching this video a bit easier. So if at any point you get confused, or you would like to rewatch something to help you with your quiz or your answer, you can pause at any point by clicking the button that looks like this. And you can rewatch some of it, or you can rewatch all of it as many times as you want. Right, let's get started. So far we have looked at the following characters. We've looked at the hero. So we looked at the fact there's been many different meanings of heroes over the years. They're generally brave, strong, heroic, charismatic, and they always save the day. But then last week we looked at the anti-hero. Now the anti-hero does not always have the best intentions. They can show some negative traits such as laziness, arrogance, selfishness, but they are not the villain. They generally help to save the day, even if it is accidental. But in between the hero and the other side of the anti-hero is the villain, and this is my favourite character. So I thought we'd start by looking at the villain and what it means. So let's look at what it might also be known as. That's AKA. So you might have heard of these words. Antagonist, bad guy, villainess, black hat, adversary, foe, arch nemesis, arch enemy, rival, and tyrant. So instead of the word villain, you might have heard one of those thrown about somewhere. But what does it even mean? Well, the definition of a villain is a character whose evil actions or motives are important to the plot. They display personality traits. They are the complete opposite of the hero. And this is what their personality is usually like. Some adjectives that are used to describe a villain might be cruel, wicked, malicious, savage, vicious, scoundrel, and immoral. And if you remember when we looked at heroes, we looked at how there's many different types of hero, and they might have changed over the years. And the same is true with the villain. So we're going to look at a few examples. The first is the fairy tale villain. They're more obviously villainous, so they're clearly evil and the bad guy. They drive the story forward and try to stop the hero from succeeding. For example, Red Riding Hood. The wolf stops Red Riding Hood from successfully going to visit her grandma by eating his grandma. So he's clearly the bad guy. Someone who's a bit less obviously evil is generally Shakespeare's villains. So for example, this picture is of Macbeth. Well, his characters are usually three-dimensional, and what that means is they've got many aspects to their personality. They're not just evil. They might be funny. They might be sometimes kind. But their actions are always evil, and that's what makes them the villain as opposed to the anti-hero. Then we come to the melodrama villain. And this is a stereotyped bad guy. The only way you could describe them is evil. There's nothing else to do with them because they're stereotyped. And they do all the classic bad guy things. You know, they're twirling their mustaches, rolling their eyes, giving evil leering looks, cackling, wah ha 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 ha, and rubbing their hands together in an evil way. And you'll see those in the sort of plays we looked at that might have been around about 200 years ago. You know, the typical story would be him kidnapping a damsel in distress and tying her to a railway track before the hero comes and saves the day. And there's two more types of villains that I think are more fascinating. So we've got the female villain, called a villainess. And they have different traits to the male villains quite often. One thing they do that the male villains don't usually do is they might use their alluring beauty as a weapon. They'll use it to lure in men, to trick them, and then they do their evil deeds. Now, obviously, I'm not suggesting that Cruella de Vil uses her appearance to kidnap the Dalmatians, but she is a famous example of a female villain, and Disney has a lot of female villains, and it's a bit more unexpected than a male villain. But the most interesting villain has got to be the sympathetic villain. Now, I've not put a picture up intentionally, and you'll find out why in a minute. So sympathetic means that you understand them, you understand what they've done, or you feel sorry for them. So they usually have the typical traits of a villain: evil, mean, aggressive, but they have a different motivation, a different reason to be evil. And it's not because they want to be evil. It actually usually is because they want to support the greater good, or they might even have a desire to make the world a better place. But their actions are inherently evil. Now, I'm going to give you a few seconds and I want you to think about a character you know that does something awful, something completely evil, but they're doing it because they really think it helps everybody and makes the universe a better place. That's a clue there. I'm going to count down and I want you to say it out loud with me. 3, 2, 1. Thanos. Now, if you remember, Thanos snaps his fingers and kills or disappears half of the universe's population. But he does that because he believes the world is overpopulated and we are killing it. And he does it in order to produce a better world for people still living. So he's got a good motivation, but his action is still evil. Here's a quote here about villains. Now, this quote is by a man called Roger Ebert. And if you've ever read a review of a film online or on the poster, up until a few years ago when he died, Roger Ebert was the most famous film critic. And he says this: each film is only as good as its villain. Since the heroes and the gimmicks tend to repeat from film to film, only a great villain can transform a good try into a triumph. So I think what he's saying there is that heroes and the events that happen, the action, the adventure that happens, can be very repetitive in each film. They're quite similar. The thing that sets each film apart and makes it unique is the villain. And if you can find a good villain that people enjoy watching, who's particularly memorable, that is when a film becomes successful. And one of the things that might make a villain more exciting and more memorable is if they've got a tragic backstory. That is when a character, usually a villain, sometimes a hero though, has a sad life history that is supposed to explain why they turned out this way. I'm going to put a picture up now of a character who's explaining their tragic backstory. And I'm not going to explain it, but I'm going to give you 20 seconds to see if you can figure out what his backstory is and why, in this case, it's used to be funny. So that there is an example of how a TV show, in this case, Phineas and Ferb, has given their villain a tragic backstory to try and make you feel sorry for them. But some people think we shouldn't do that. Some people think that instead of having a tragic backstory, the villains should be kept mysterious, and that we don't always have to explain why someone's evil. Sometimes they are just evil. Instead of me explaining it, there's a video we're going to watch which is much better. So this leads us on to task 1. In a minute, I'm going to ask you to pause this video, and you are going to go to the description at the bottom of my video, where there will be a link that looks like this. I would like you, if possible, to right-click and click Open Link in New Tab. What that does is it opens a new one without skipping this. If you can't, that's fine. You'll just have to come back to this later by clicking your back button. And I want you to watch all the video. Now, this is slightly different to our other videos. It is not a cartoon. It's a guy doing a voiceover as he shows clips from films and describes the stories and why they're good or bad. You might want to put the subtitles on like I have, because his accent can be a bit difficult to understand at times. As soon as you've watched that, you're going to go on to task 2. And that is go into the second task on Show My Homework and completing the quiz. Don't forget you can do that as many times as you need. Once you've done that, come back to watch the end of this video. So now I want you to pause this video, see how far into it we are, and then you know to come back, and I want you to do these tasks. Once you're ready, come back and watch the rest of this video. Okay, I hope you enjoyed that video, and I hope that you saw some examples of tragic backstories where they've helped, for example, Lotso, and where they haven't helped, for example, the villain in the Saw movies. We've got one more task, task 3. And for that task, I want you to think of a villain from a story you like. And I want you to try to pick one that wasn't in the video. And very simply, you're going to answer the following 4 questions for me. As usual, I'll put these in the description on Show My Homework so that you can copy them from there. So 1, who are they? What story are they from? 2, what villainous traits do they have? 3, what is their motivation for doing evil things? And 4, do they have a tragic backstory? If so, what is it? I'm going to give you an example now so that you can see the kind of answer I want you to give and the amount of detail I want you to include. So my example, I don't think he was mentioned in the film, apologies if he was, is Lord Voldemort. So, number 1. He is the villain from the Harry Potter stories. The Wizarding World thought he died many years ago, but he comes back and he grows stronger with the help of his followers, the Death Eaters, who are also evil, which you can tell from the name. Number 2, well, for one thing, his appearance looks villainous, doesn't it? It's unattractive. He's missing his nose and he's not fully formed as a human yet. In terms of his actions, well, he performs the cursed spells, such as Avada Kedavra, which he uses to kill people. And he laughs when he does this. He finds it entertaining and amusing, which is inherently evil. Number 3, he's got interesting motivations, actually. He's motivated by immortality. He wants to live forever. By superiority, of both by wanting to be superior and also believing that a certain type of wizard is better than the others. And he's motivated by racial cleansing, which is where he wants to get rid of half-bloods, who are wizards who have one parent who's a wizard and one who's a muggle or a human. He's also motivated by his self-hatred. He hates himself, and I think in part he wants to become superior and better than everyone else. Now, does he have a tragic backstory? Well, yes, he does. His father abandoned him and his mother before he was born, and his mum died in childbirth. That meant that he spent his younger years in an orphanage. And if you look at that picture, that is Tom Riddle, who is Voldemort as a boy, and he later changed his name to Voldemort. Now, because of his tragic backstory, he never had a real family or an unconditionally intimate and loving relationship with another person. As a result, he didn't develop those nice traits, friendly, kind, selfless, that people do when they've been brought up with loving relatives or friends. And that is partly why he becomes the villain that he does. Okay, so I want your examples. And you could send it to me in 3 ways now. I've got an extra way. So number 1, take a picture, send it to me and Show My Homework. Number 2, post it in the comment box or write your answer So you write your answer directly there and post it. Or number 3, a new way that Miss Solomon's just explained to me. Sometimes some of you already do this and you send it to me like this and it looks like a Word document, but you can do it without having Microsoft Word. And the way you do this is you go to submit, you type a message for your teacher or even your full answer, and then you click submit assignment to teacher. And what that means is that it automatically marks it as submitted instead of me having to change it once I read your comment. Okay, but if this is too complex, just do the other 2 ways, that's fine. All that's left for me to say is have a lovely week, keep safe, and have fun.